Good morning. As we get started, I want to give you a quick reminder of our challenge that I laid out last week, and I want to show you something real quick that might help you. Remember last week we were talking about memorization, and we were talking about meditating on the Word of God, and about that, and because of that, memorizing, we talked about let's, as a congregation, go ahead and memorize Romans chapter 12. Romans chapter 12 is a wonderful chapter. It gives you a list of what a Christian is and what a Christian should be, what a Christian should be doing. And so we have until January 31st. It's a pretty good timeline to go ahead and memorize that. And so what I want to do, I want to share something with you and show you. This was Jacob who shared this with me last week. It is an app called Versify. Now, Versify is an app that helps you memorize Scripture. And so I wanted to walk you through that and show it to you. And I may have disconnected. That might be my fault. I'm going to keep trying this. Yeah. I'm going to step down here just so you can see it. There we go. All right. So here's Versify, and here's how it works. You go download that, and what you're going to have is and number one, I took my emails off of there because last time I shared my screen, everybody saw how many emails I had, and I had some flack from that, and there were 18,000, so I went and took that off of there. So anyway, when you open Versify, that little plus sign down at the bottom, you can add whatever scripture. What I did is I took Romans chapter 12 and I split it into sections. That 3 through 8 is pretty hefty, by the way. But once you get that done, you're able to practice those sections and it helps you memorize. I'll show you this, Romans 12, 1 and 2. And it helps you read it. It will tell it to you. You can listen to it being read, and then you can give yourself a test. I'll show you this, reading it. Here's what you do. It's kind of like a prompt, like you should start it. And as you tap the screen, I appeal to you, therefore, brothers. All right, you tap the screen, and there it is. And so you can go through the whole passage like that. This one's pretty cool, too. We're going to do easy blanks. It gives you a word bank at the bottom. Isn't that something cool? I think, let's see, so we choose I, appeal to you, therefore, brothers. I'll let you see how that works. I won't go through the whole thing. It works, all right, I promise. But it has a little test there at the end. You can see how many times you practiced, last time you practiced. And so Versify, pretty cool thing, maybe that will help you in your effort to memorize as a congregation. Again, this is not just a Lads to Leaders challenge. This is for all of us memorizing Romans chapter 12. So wanted to share that with you. And I'm sure there's plenty of other things you can use, other tools that will help you memorize that passage, but hopefully you're already working on that. I know some people are. That is because you text me and you've told me, and so that's really it's really exciting. It's really cool that we're doing that. So anyway, with that, let's move into our topic today. You may have seen the topic in the bulletin is Black Friday. I don't know what you're looking forward to this week. Hopefully you have the whole week off, or at least a few days off this week, especially on Thursday. Maybe you have family in town. You can look around and see that some have already traveled, begun their travels for Thanksgiving, and I hope you have a great feast and a great time planned for Thursday. But then we go to Black Friday. And I don't know what your Black Friday traditions are. I don't know what your Black Friday plans are. But a few things about that. According to History.com, according to Encyclopedia-Britannica.com, so those are two, I guess you could depend on those sources to be reliable. The first recorded instance or use of the term Black Friday actually dates back to 1869. In 1869, there were a couple of guys in New York. They were stockbrokers, financiers, and they got together and they had a plan. What they were going to do is they were going to buy up as much gold as they could. And when they did that, it was going to push the price of gold up. Then they're going to sell the gold off. They were going to be rich. Well, the government found out about this and they put a stop to that plan. And when they did, that threw the stock market into a crash. That crash happened on September 24th, 1869. It became known as a Black Friday. Also, another recorded usage of the term Black Friday was in 1961, or in the 60s really. 1961, I think it really kind of came about. The Army-Navy game was played and is usually played in Philadelphia. I don't know how many years they played that game. Over 90 of them have been played in Philadelphia. It's been other places, other times, but traditionally in Philadelphia. And In that time, what would happen is on the Friday after Thanksgiving, all these people would come into Philadelphia and the population would swell. And with that would come traffic and crowds. They would shop. Now, along with that, people would come to sell, and all these things are happening. And so the police officers of Philadelphia, obviously, they couldn't get the day off. They knew they were going to have to work. They knew they were going to run into trouble, shoplifting and other things that happen when you get that many people together. And it was all in preparation for that Army-Navy game that was going to be on that Saturday. So that Friday for Philadelphia became known for a while as a Black Friday. Now, the Black Friday we know, it really caught on in the late 80s. And you probably remember this if you have been around that long. And it became this biggest shopping day, biggest retail shopping day of the year following Thanksgiving. It kicked off the holiday season. Black Friday at one point kind of got out of control. We know this. We've been through this. We kind of lived through that. They called it Black Friday, and they took the term and they tried to give it more of a positive connotation by saying that, these retail operators throughout most of the year, they've been operating in the red, very thin margins, not a lot of sales. And they could depend on that Friday after Thanksgiving, though, to move them into the black. All of a sudden, they're operating in the black. They're making money. They're making a profit. Black Friday, and then it just kind of took off from there throughout the 90s into the 2000s. And I don't know, you may remember Black Friday, or maybe you have survived some Black Fridays that looked a little bit like this. In 2011, that's when Walmart caught on and said, hey, guess what? We're going to start Black Friday on Thursday night. And there were several years that Lana and I, we were just fat and happy. We'd eaten Thanksgivings back when we traveled more for Thanksgiving. And we had 3 Thanksgiving meals that day. And about 8:30, 9 o'clock, we get the paper out. Want to go to Best Buy? Absolutely. We go to Best Buy. Stood in line. One year we stood in line outside of a Toys R Us for a little while. We were almost on the news. I couldn't get Lana to move over in front of the camera. I was trying as hard as I could. She was not having it. It was in Birmingham. She was like, people are going to know me and they're going to see me. And I'm like, I know. Let's get in front of the camera. But that's what Black Friday became, right? And there are all these stories of people getting trampled and fighting over TVs and all these different things. And I think at this point, it's probably leveled off a little bit, especially thanks to online shopping. You already are getting texts and emails about online Black Friday deals that you can already take advantage of. Here's some stuff. In 2024, 131 million people made one purchase, at least one purchase on Black Friday. On average, this year, it's projected that Americans, on average, will spend $675 to $700 on Black Friday. That will equate to over $100 billion in one day on retail and even online purchases. Last year, the most searched products were AirPods Pro, an iPhone 16s, PS5s, and a Dyson Airwrap. I don't know what that is, but it was very popular last year on Black Friday. It is the best day to buy a TV. I'll be honest with you, they got 55-inch TVs at Sam's. We saw them the other day. I was walking through with my mom. They're about $200. So I think everybody gets a TV this year. That's a great deal. With all of that, also, Black Friday is the busiest day for plumbers. I'll let you figure that one out. Now, I don't know what your Black Friday plans are. I don't know if you still get up at 4 o'clock and you love getting in line. I like big, fast, and loud. I love a crowd, so I don't mind getting out in it. It's fun. Sometimes they still try to get you offline and into the store, so you're going to get a little extra rebate or the door buster if you get there at a certain time. And so, maybe that's fun to you, maybe it's not, maybe it's something you want to avoid like the plague, and that's okay as well. But today, what I want to do is I'll take that idea of Black Friday and think about it in this context. There was a Friday a couple thousand years ago. And we don't use that term, Black Friday, but there was a Friday a couple thousand years ago. And when you think about what happened on that Friday, what you realize is that was the darkest Friday. That it was, you want to describe something in a negative connotation. It was not just the darkest Friday or the darkest day. It was the darkest day of that time period. It was the darkest day of all human history. Probably for most people, it started out as a regular Friday, at least a regular Friday for that time of year. It was Passover in Jerusalem. And you talk about Black Friday crowds. When Passover came along, a city of about 40,000 people swelled to over 130,000, people coming from all around the region to celebrate the Feast of the Unleavened Bread that led up to the celebration of the Passover. It was an 8-day thing. People stayed wherever they could stay. Camps would pop up outside the city. They would come in, and when it was time to make those sacrifices, and then, just like we talked about Philadelphia, when a crowd comes into a city like that, there are those who are going to come in to take advantage of it, right? People need food. They need lodging. They need supplies. Some needed their lamb to sacrifice, and so there were those. We read about Jesus cleansing the temple, and it was those selling those sacrifices to people that that was directed toward. And so the city is swelling. And for most, again, they're waking up and they've enjoyed this time of worship and remembrance during that 8-day feast and that 8-day celebration. But while it began that way for most of those over 100,000 people, by 9 o'clock that morning, a man named Jesus was hanging on a cross, and 2 people were hanging to his left and to his right. And that was the culmination of everything that had happened over the last several hour period. Jesus had celebrated the Passover with his apostles. Following that, he's arrested. He was betrayed by one of his loyal apostles, one that had been with him for 3 years. Yet he's the one that turns him over to the authorities. Another one of his beloved apostles denies that he even knows him, cursing his very name, turning his back on Jesus. He goes through 6 trials. He goes before Annas, the former high priest, and then he goes to the house of Caiaphas, the high priest. He stands before the Jewish council at one point, and during all these things, he's questioned hastily. These trials are not even following Jewish tradition, and then going into the trials before the Roman governors, it's not actually following the right procedures. They're being done quickly, carelessly, but methodically, by those who are accusing him. But as he stands before that high priest and he's kind of sent away, he's blindfolded, he's spit on, he's beaten, he's laughed at, he's mocked, he's insulted. He's sent to Pilate. Pilate sends him to Herod. He realizes he's from Galilee. He needs to go to Herod. Herod uses this opportunity to question him. Beaten again. Sent back to Pilate. Pilate at that point decides, and he realizes there's nothing wrong that this man has done. He is innocent. He actually pleads to a crowd, let me release him. And the crowd decides to release instead a murderer, Barabbas. And at the bidding of that frenzied crowd, Pilate lets Barabbas go, and he sends Jesus away to be crucified, once again being tortured, being whipped, a crown being forced on his head of thorns inches long. He's stripped, laughed at, ridiculed, mocked once again. As thousands slept, this is what's going on with Jesus. Ultimately, he's made to carry a cross under whose weight that he collapses, and that cross is given to someone else to carry for him. He arrives at this place called Golgotha, the place of the skull. It's called that because of the shape and what it looks like, but also what it represents. Many, many men have walked to that place, and it being the place where they were executed. And now that's where Jesus is. That's where he was, him and 2 other criminals that were taken there with him. And that's where we find this next phrase. You know, when you read through the Gospels give us a picture of the life of Jesus on earth. And it's really awesome that we have 4 accounts, because the more accounts we have, the more truth we can find. They don't contradict each other. They all tell a portion of the story, and they all tell it from a different perspective. And so they don't all tell the whole story, but there are things that show up in all 4 Gospels. The crucifixion is one of those things. And if you read each account from Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, you get the full picture of what happened that day. And one thing that they all share, one thing in common in their account of the crucifixion, is when he arrives about 9 o'clock that morning on that Friday, It says this: they crucified him. That's it. A short phrase, 3 words, but those words cannot do justice. They cannot adequately describe what happened to him. They crucified him. Tradition tells us that the spikes used to hold Jesus on the cross were somewhere between 6 and 8 inches long, thick enough, long enough to drive through the arm into the wood and hold the weight of a human body. The convicted would be thrown down upon that beam, arms stretched wide, and the skill of the one carrying out the crucifixion takes that spike, and it's that little soft spot there in your wrist, and it's going to go between the tendons and between the bones, because that is what's going to hold them on the cross. One hand, then the other, then his feet. They're stacked, knees bent just a little, a nail driven through the feet as well. Then the cross is lifted up and it's dropped into a hole, and it's mounted there, and there the convicted, the accused, is hung there to wait for death, however long it may take. And that death would come due to suffocation or asphyxiation, and that's due to the position of the body. You could take a breath in, but with great difficulty could you exhale. And so there was a constant lifting, just trying to breathe, just trying to breathe. Along with the suffocation, there's the blood loss, there's the shock, the dehydration, the exhaustion, all playing a part into that eventual death. And all this is happening on that Friday, about 9 o'clock in the morning, to the Son of God, one who had come to seek and save the lost, one who had walked about peacefully among these people for 33 years. He was helping, healing, and teaching all those that he encountered. Yet there he was, after a night that many wouldn't survive, hanging on that cross on the darkest Friday, the darkest day of human history. There's a lot of ways to study the crucifixion, to look at those 6 hours that Friday that Jesus spent on the cross. There's a lot of ways to look at that, a lot of angles, things that led up to that, the events that happened after it, the people that were involved. This morning, what I want to do in the time we have remaining, I want to take a look at the statements Jesus made while he was hanging on that cross, in that pain and in that torment. We have recorded 7 statements that he made. The gospel writers, each one recording 1 or 2 of these, and then again, you put all that together to get a complete picture of those 6 hours. Now, we don't have time to do all 7, but there's 2 of them, and I picked these 2 for a reason, and we're going to talk about that as we go through this. So let's start with the first statement Jesus makes as he is hanging on the cross. He says, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." Luke chapter 23 is where we're going to find both of the statements we'll talk about. Beginning in verse 33, it says, "When they came to the place that is called the Skull, there they crucified him, and the criminals, one on his right, one on his left. And Jesus said, 'Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do.' And they cast lots to divide his garments." So, as the Son of God is being laid on that cross and then lifted up, hanging there with the nails through his hands and through his feet, the first thing he says, now I don't know, for a convicted criminal, someone who should be there, I wonder what they would say. What would their response be to be nailed to that cross and hung there? And now you just have hours to stand there and or hang there until death finally releases you. I wonder what they would say. What's going through your mind? Here you have an opportunity to say anything you want. You can call that Roman soldier whatever you want. You can give your opinion about the Jewish laws and all these different things and the conviction or whatever it might be. Insults, whatever it might be. What are they going to do to you at this point, right? So in all of that, Jesus says, forgive them. Forgive them. The first thing he says as he is hung on the cross. Now, I believe, and I think most agree, that this was directed to those soldiers, the ones that just nailed them to the cross. Yeah, think about these guys. These guys are pros. You think about waking up on that Friday. These guys got up. They had the assignment of working crucifixions, I guess. Maybe they've done this multiple times. In fact, up to this point, when Jesus was crucified, it's estimated that in the region of Judea, in that area, at the point Jesus was crucified, over 30,000 people had been crucified from that area. These guys are pros. They know exactly where to put that nail. They know exactly how to mount you on that cross so that you hang in pain, so the death is not immediate. Death is long and drawn out. They've done this before. And maybe on a day like this Friday, they get up and there's this annoyance of all these people that have come to Jerusalem. And now there's just these crowds everywhere, and they're watching you do your work. And, there's hardly anything worse than somebody watching you over your shoulder as you do your job, right? But they did their job. They nailed him to the cross. And now their job is to wait, to watch over those who are accused, those who are hanging, until they die. And as they do that, they take Jesus' clothes and they gamble for him. He's not using them anymore, right? So let's gamble for him. Let's divide this up. You take this, you take that, I'll take his cloak, whatever it might be. And as they're doing these things, the very moments that they're nailing him to the cross, Jesus says, "Father, forgive them. They know not what they do." That's how they started. You go to Matthew's account and you get to Matthew chapter 27. In fact, Matthew, Mark, and Luke have an account of this. After that 6 hours later, we read that the centurion that watched over him, watching over Jesus during that time that he's on the cross, for 6 hours watching 3 men die. He changed. He changed. It's a statement that he makes, and it's a statement of faith. It's a statement of a heart that's been broken. It's a statement of the heart that is starting to ask questions and starting to understand who this person may be. In Matthew 27:54, it says, "When the centurion and those were with him, keeping watch over Jesus, saw the earthquake." What took place? You remember the earthquake? Dead rose from their graves. The curtain in the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. When they saw these things happening, and when they watched Jesus for 6 hours on that cross, it says they, and that's important, they were filled with awe. Matthew writes that he said, "Truly, this was the Son of God." In a 6-hour period, he went from just, this is an accused criminal, another criminal that I'm nailing to the cross, carrying out their execution, doing my job. 6 hours later, he says, this was the Son of God. And not just him, it's plural. Matthew says, and those who were with him. The men, the very men that had gambled for his clothes earlier in the day, now their hearts are telling them, this one was different. This was the Son of God. All of a sudden, the regular day of work had changed. This regular day for these men had turned into something else because that man was different. This crucifixion was different. Did it start when they heard him with the opportunity to say anything he could on that cross? And he took the opportunity to say, "Father, forgive these men who put me on the cross." Is that when it started? I would say probably. That's going to make them stop in their tracks. I'm willing to think that they probably never heard anyone respond that way to being put on a cross. And consider this. If Jesus can, while hanging on a cross, after the torturous night he had been through and that morning, can look at the people who put him on the cross and say, "God, forgive them." Tell me who you cannot forgive. Tell me who has offended you in such a way, who has done you so wrong in your life that you can't offer them forgiveness and fix that relationship. Jesus forgave the people who were killing him right after they did it. Who has offended you so much that we can't offer that same forgiveness? That's really something to think about. I want to move on, continuing in Luke chapter 23. We'll pick up in verse 43, another statement. This is the second statement that we have recorded by Luke that Jesus said. He says this, "Truly, I say to you, today you will be with me in paradise." Now, obviously there's some context around that. We need to build this out a little bit because this is Jesus who has listened to a conversation between the criminal on his left and the criminal on his right, and this is his response to one of those criminals after hearing their conversation. And so that's his line. Let's back up a little bit and get the context of this. Luke 23, beginning in verse 39, one of the criminals who were hanged with him railed at him, saying, "Are you not the Christ? Save yourself and us." But the other rebuked him, saying, "Do you not fear God, since you are under the same sentence of condemnation? We indeed justly, for we are receiving due reward for our deeds, but this man has done nothing wrong." And he said, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." And he said to him, "Truly I say to you, today you will be with me in paradise." It was his response to that second criminal. I want to break this down just a little bit. So the first thing, one of the criminals who were hanged railed at him. Railed at him. Now, first of all, he is called a criminal. Some of our versions are going to say he's a thief. Whatever it might be, it is a malefactor, an evildoer. He is convicted of some crime where the punishment, the due punishment, was crucifixion. He broke the law and he's paying with his life. He should be there. Then it says he railed against him. He railed against him. I don't know how much we use that term. Hopefully you don't rail against people very often. Blaspheme, speak evil, to slander, to revile. He is tossing insults at Jesus left and right. Why would he be doing this? What does this criminal on this cross have against Jesus? Is he playing off the crowd? We read that the crowd's coming by and they're just throwing insults at him. They're calling him all kinds of names. They're challenging him to say, hey, if you're God, then get off the cross. Maybe he's playing off of that. But when he starts doing this, part of that insult is, if you are, right? If you are the Christ, save us. Now, did he care if Jesus or the other criminal was saved? No, this was a selfish request. He wanted to get off that cross. And if this is a man that has the power to do it, then show me your power and do it. Now, Luke calls him a criminal here. And I wonder if we could replace that word and say a sinner. I want you to think about these two men on the cross and this first criminal we read about and what he represents. He represents any or every lost person in this world that has rejected Jesus. We encounter people like this every single day. People who reject God, people who rail against him. They insult God. They speak out against God. These lost people. I think about Galatians 5 and verse 19, where Paul says, the works of the flesh are evident. Sexual immorality, impurity, sensuality, idolatry, sorcery, enmity, strife, jealousy, fits of anger, rivalries, dissensions, divisions, envy, drunkenness, orgies, and things like these. This man represents those who are carrying out this lifestyle, reviling against God, railing against God, lost people in this world. He is in a lost, sinful, condemned condition. He is no different than anyone else in that same condition. And now when he is presented with Jesus, hanging next to him on this cross, he has a choice. And what that choice is accept him or reject him. And so what this man does is he mocks him, he ridicules him, he rejects. Now we contrast that with the other criminal, what we read. The other criminal said, he rebuked him. And he said, do you not fear God? Now he's speaking across Jesus here. And he's talking to the other criminal. I always think that guy was on the left and the second guy was on the right. Do you feel that way too? I feel that way. Anyway, he's speaking across him. And says, do you not fear God? Since you're under the same sentence, we're both up here. We both have done the thing we did and we were accused and we're up here justly. We are paying for our crimes. Receiving, he says, our due reward, but Jesus is innocent. he has done nothing wrong. So yes, this man is also a criminal in the same definition, in the same sense. He is there convicted of his crime, a crime that apparently required crucifixion as the punishment. He's done something like that. Mark tells us that he even began reviling Jesus like the other criminal. That's interesting. He started the day just like the soldiers. He started the day just like all those that were passing by, throwing insults at Jesus. But at some point, he also changed. Maybe he heard him forgive the soldiers that nailed him to the cross. Maybe he saw Jesus, who was hanging there, saying nothing, accepting a punishment he did not deserve. The first thief was looking for a way out, while the second thief was looking for a way in. His heart was broken. His heart was broken, and he rebukes the first criminal. He says, listen, we deserve this. We're guilty. This man has done nothing wrong. And what you find here is you find an honest sinner. And what God is looking for is an honest sinner. And what that means is that you're being, first of all, honest about your own sins. This man says, we deserve to be here. I deserve to be on the cross. Can we be honest about our sins? I am lost. I am the sinner. He's also honest about his ability or his inability to save himself. He's going to ask Jesus to save him. Will you take me into your kingdom today? He can't do anything for himself at this point. He is completely 100% helpless. He's also honest about who Jesus is. He says, into your kingdom. Sometime during those hours on the cross, instead of rejecting this man who hung between them, he realized who he was. And he knew that this man was the Son of God. He was an honest sinner. Honest about his sins, honest about his inability to save himself, and honest about Jesus and who he was. And at that point, he calls out to him, he cries out to him, asking for his forgiveness. First criminal is going to represent the lost of this world that reject Jesus. Second criminal is going to represent an honest sinner who accepts Jesus and his grace and his forgiveness. And when we do that, we cry out to them. Just like they did in Acts chapter 2, what must I do to be saved? Just like this criminal here who cries out and says, please take me today into your kingdom with you. And Jesus responds, truly I say to you, today you will be with me in paradise. Now again, we don't have time to go through the other 5 statements. It's worth reading. The reason these 2 are significant, though, is that what this demonstrates to us is that who Jesus was on the cross was exactly who Jesus was before the cross and exactly who Jesus is after the cross. He did not change. He was still here to forgive, to seek and save the lost, filled with compassion. And you think about that, even in his darkest hour on this earth, the darkest day in all of human history, he's still mission-focused. And he still loves, and he still forgives. And you think about that. Forgiving those who put him on the cross as they're putting him on the cross. My sin put him on that cross. Yet when I accept Jesus, what I realize is that he looks at me and he says, you're forgiven. Just like he did those soldiers. And when I find myself in that state and I realize where I am and I realize I'm guilty and I'm honest with my sin and honest with myself, and I take on Jesus in baptism and have those sins washed away, then I will hear what that criminal heard. And we will be in paradise with him. 2 significant statements from Jesus hanging on a cross on a Friday. I ask you this morning, can you be an honest sinner? Can you say that it is my sin that nailed him to the cross? Can you be an honest sinner and say that I cannot save myself? My works, my attitude, anything I do cannot save me. Can you be honest and say, only you, Jesus, can save me? Will you cry out to him, what must I do to be saved and accept the forgiveness that he gives us. I call on you to do that this morning. If you are in a lost state, if you're separated from God, if you're not a Christian this morning, be an honest sinner. Give your life to Christ. You can come forward, put Christ on in baptism. We want nothing more as a congregation than to welcome you in to this family. And if you have any other need, if you've fallen away, if you've turned away from Jesus, if you've become one of those who rejects him and insults him and reviles him instead of loving him, you can make that change today as well. And we encourage you to do that as we stand together and sing.